All right, let's take a look at the layout of our main console, the Digico SD8. So the way we have this console set up and the way it's kind of designed to set up a little bit is the center section here is sort of all of the output channels, and the two side sections are input channels. So if we come in here and look at each of these different banks of faders, the top bank is vocals and acoustic guitars and then a few channels of extra stuff. The second layer is instruments. So we've got electric guitars, keys, a couple of extra things, tracks, and bass. The next layer is drums, pretty self-explanatory. And then the last layer is called in-ear monitor only, IEM only. And this layer, this bank, excuse me, is comprised of a second set of vocal channels, a second overhead channel, and then things that only the band hears in their ears. So click, cues or guide, MD, and comm, our production intercom, coming back to the board and to the band. So this second set of vocals is actually what the vocalists hear. So the top set, if I switch here to the top layer, the top set is what I might call the house channels. So these are processed vocals. We're doing EQ, compression, auto-tune on those, and we listen to those out here in the house. The back line, the musicians on the back line, drummer, bassist, keys, electrics, they also listen to these vocals. But the front line, the singers themselves, are actually listening to the other set of vocals. And these vocals are less heavily processed. They just have a little bit of EQ on them, definitely no auto-tune, so that the vocalists aren't hearing that in their ears. And also the compression, there's not really any compression on them, so they're hearing the full dynamics of what they're singing. And rather than trying to send processed vocals to each other, we just use this whole set of channels for the whole front line. That simplifies it a little bit, but it's still kind of a complicated system. So that's the four main banks of faders here on the left side. If we hit this button and go down one more layer, we get another set of four. So this first one is the effects, so reverb and delay, and then all of the audience mics, as well as a couple of extra things. And then the next one is choir. So whenever we have a choir, got a set of channels for doing choir. And then an empty one, and then lastly, a duplicate of one that we'll see over on the right-hand side. And then when I hit layer again, I go back to the top four banks of channels. So let me skip the middle section for a minute and go over here to the right-hand side. You'll see that the top three are identical to the left side, and then the bottom is the wireless and playback. So the only difference really between the left group of faders and the right group of faders is the bottom bank, right? On this side, it's the in-ear only, and on this side, it's wireless and playback. And the wireless and playback bank has all of the talker mics and then iPad and video channels. And like the left-hand side, there are layers here. There's a few extra things on those that I won't take time to explain. So then in the center section, we have our main, kind of our home page that we call Mix. And on this bank, we've got a bunch of what are called control groups, or other consoles call these DCAs, digitally controlled amplifiers, which is a kind of a misnomer. It's not really what it is anymore. It's really just a remote control. So when I move this fader, it's actually the exact same as moving all of the faders that are linked to it by the same amount. Then we've got we've got some reverb channels, and then we've got a few more control groups for video playback and talkers. Let me step back here and say the band group has all of the instruments, everything in it except the voices, which are here on this DCA. So if I take these two faders and pull them down, the entire band and vocalists are all going to disappear from the mix. The second bank here is actually an important one. So aux 1 through 12, these are the in-ear monitors for the band. So really it's just these top two. You're probably not going to need the bottom two very often. There is a layer here that gets you to some other things. Again, you shouldn't need those either. So really just these top two banks in the center section. One more thing I want to say about navigating on the console is how to bring up a set of channels here on the main screen. So the screen really has 4 different options, and all 4 of them live right here in this space, and then there's a couple other ways to get there as well. So there is a master screen, there's a left screen, a right screen, and then a center screen, which can be gotten to by these screen assign buttons. So if I push this, now I'm looking at the channels that are currently here on this center section. All right, so I'm looking at these control groups for all the blue channels, a couple of channels of reverb, and then some more control groups at the end that match the ones that I see down here on the faders. If I want to look at the left part of the console, the left-hand set of faders, which is currently on vocals and acoustics, well, when I push the left button, that's what I get on the screen. I'm looking at all of those channels and their various parameters. The other way that I can do that is with the screen assign that's in each section. So here's a screen assign, here's a screen assign, here's a screen assign. Right, so if I hit this one, you'll notice that in the middle, it'll switch from left to right, and the screen will change. All right, so this just switched to right, and now the channels that I'm looking at on the screen are those that are on the right-hand side. So wireless and playback in this case. So the left and the right buttons sort of have duplicates here on the fader banks themselves, on the left and the right. The master and the center section do not. There's just one button in the center for each of those. So that's how you change what you're looking at there on the screen.